In SolidWorks, you can create a limit angle mate, which in Creo Parametric corresponds to joint axis settings on rotation for a pin or a cylinder connection. Let's take a look at how to do that. And I'm going to warn you, I'm not trying to rip on SolidWorks, but I had a lot of trouble getting this to work. I've noted some peculiarities, and I've also seen a bunch of questions online about getting this to work as well. But anyhow, here I have my assembly open. It's got 3 different components. I'm going to insert a component that is open in another window. When I go to that, I can see that here is the open document. I will click on it, and I'm going to drop it in the graphics area, right about up over here out of the way. And that closes the insert components dialog box. And now let's start adding mates in order to locate this. I will click on mate, and let's pick a cylindrical surface and another cylindrical surface, and that is giving us a concentric mate. I'm happy with that. I will hit the check mark, and I'm going to complete the mate commands so I can show you that if I click and drag on this, it's got a rotational and a translational degree of freedom. Let's leave it about here. Let me deselect everything, and we will get back into the mate command. And right now I am on the standard tab. For locating this, for eliminating translation, normally I would go to the advanced tab and do a width mate. I was having some trouble getting the width mate to work, so I'm going to go back to the standard tab and just do a regular distance mate. Let me start by selecting some flat surfaces for defining a distance. And since I picked those 2 flat surfaces, right now it is giving me coincident. From this toolbar, I will choose distance instead. And here it's giving me a value. I happen to know that I want a distance of 10. That'll work in this situation. I'm happy with that. And I will hit the check mark. And there we can see our component. Once again, I'm going to complete out of creating mates to show you that if I click on this, we have 1 rotational degree of freedom. But you can see that I'm getting collision with the first component in the assembly, and I don't want that. So I want to set limits on the motion. So let's put the component about here. Let me click on the background to deselect everything, and let's set up how I want to look at this. And so in order to apply those different limits on the rotation, that is called a limit angle mate. Let's go back to the mate command and then click on the advanced tab. And down here, we have the ability to specify the angle that we want to use. And here is one thing that is different from Creo Parametric. In Creo Parametric, I can select surfaces that don't go through the axis of rotation, and it'll end up creating an internal plane going through the axis of rotation in order to use as one of the references for the angle. I just found that that does not work so well in SolidWorks. For that reason, I'm going to go to my visibility controls and turn on the display of some planes. I had some planes turned on previously. I'm going to use those planes for defining my angle. And so for my different mate selections, I will click this plane, and then I'm going to zoom in and make sure I get the plane called front. And if you take a look at them, these planes intersect through the axis of rotation. And so let's click that, and the model flipped. That happens. Before I fix the angle, correct any of that, I want to point out the next selection in here. It's something called the reference entity. And so sometimes when you're using angles, you can get the components to flip in ways that you don't want, especially if you go over 180 degrees. And so to alleviate that, a few years ago, SolidWorks added the ability to define a reference entity. If I click in this little collector, it should give me a tooltip telling me what I can pick. I can pick a plane, planar face, linear edge, or a reference axis. And as it notes, this is optional, but it really helps to pick it. But sometimes you don't know what to pick. And for that reason, there is an icon to the left to autofill the reference entity. So I'm going to choose that. And you can see that it gives us a little angle marker on the screen to help control the angle. And right now it's saying that this is 30 degrees, but it's kind of on the other side of where I want to control the angle. I want it rotating over on this side, and I want it to go almost to where it would touch this surface and go up to a maximum of vertical. Let me try flipping the dimension. Okay, so that's a value of 30. We can plug in different values in order to see what that would look like. I can try 45, and I say, okay, 45 is still giving me collision, giving me interference. Let's try 60. And I say, oh, you know what? 60 looks pretty good. I might want to use that as my minimum angle value. Let's take a look at what some of the other different values look like. So here's 90 degrees. Okay, that's one position. Let me try 180 and hit the enter key. Okay, and I decide that, hey, 180, I want that to be my maximum angle. And so let me plug in let's plug 90 back in here. So it's right in the middle of what I want to use. For the minimum value, let me put in my 60 that I decided earlier and the 180 that I just took a look at and hit that value. And so now I've got everything defined for my limit angle mate. Let's hit the check mark in order to complete that. Let's go to our visibilities and turn off the display of the planes. Let's hit the check mark to complete out of creating our different mates. I'm going to collapse my mates folder. And now I should be able to grab on here, and you can see that we're only able to rotate it through these certain values that I specified in the mate. So in that way, that's how you can define a limit angle mate for restricting your rotational motion.